Do you carefully consider your next potential cross-stitch project, or are you like me and you leap into it without really thinking things through? I'm Michelle, this is my romantic tangle, and I have 5 things for you to consider before you choose your next cross-stitch project. There is some overlap between these things, but I think it'll give you some things to consider that might help you avoid mistakes I've made in the past and picking projects that you aren't going to finish or that you really aren't going to enjoy stitching. First and easiest thing to consider is how much is this going to cost you to stitch? If you're buying a kit, that is really easy. If you're buying a pattern, it may or may not be easy. I used to do almost exclusively full coverage landscapes and buildings with DMC. So once I bought the pattern, the floss and the Ada was pretty much going to cost the same or close to the same no matter which project I picked. If you are walking into your local needlework store and falling in love with that thing you saw on the wall, look at the materials list. You're going to have the cost of your pattern, you're going to have fabric and floss, and look and see if you are going to need a specific fabric and a specific floss to reproduce what you loved about that project, or embellishments or beads, or if there is some kind of special framing or finishing that you're going to need to make it look the way you want. There are some projects I would dearly love to stitch, but I know the price tags put them beyond what I would pay, either because there are out of print kits that are selling for high prices on eBay, or because they're expensive patterns that come with expensive threads and expensive embellishments. I'm not saying that any of those things are bad. I'm just saying go into it with your eyes open and know what you're committing to before you buy a pattern that maybe you're going to decide not to stitch. Number 2, how big of a project is this? By big, that can mean there are a gazillion stitches, or big can mean that it is going to take a huge piece of fabric. It seems like a huge piece of fabric shouldn't be a big deal, but sometimes that can put you in a position where you're buying stuff you can't get at your local craft store or your local needlework store, which might make things more difficult. I stitched Little Girl with Cosmos, and I loved it. She's cute. She was a kit I got dirt cheap at the thrift store, but it is a big piece of stitching, and I'm honestly not sure I want to devote that much real estate on my wall to hanging her. But most of my projects go in my under the bed box anyway, so that won't matter. Number 3, are there special elements here that are going to affect your stitching? Does it have sections of over 1 or specialty stitches that are going to require even weave or linen when maybe you prefer to stitch on Ada? Does it have beads? Does it require some kind of specialty finishing? If you fell in love with that cute stitch drum at your needlework shop, do you know how to stitch that yourself and do the finishing, or are you willing to pay someone who does know how to do it? It would be a shame to stitch the project and then realize that you're not going to be able to get it finished the way you want to. Number 4, does this project contain elements that you don't like? For me, my current thing I don't like in cross-stitch projects is white and off-white floss. If you watch my Flosstube videos, you will know that I continue to pick out projects that have a lot of white or a lot of white floss. I also rule out a lot of potential projects, usually because it's a landscape with snow, and I already have lots of landscapes with snow. Snow, curtains, and white dresses, those are not my favorite thing to stitch, but I love the projects when they're done. Does it contain lots of back stitching if you hate back stitching? Does it contain lots of confetti if you hate confetti? Does it have lots of hunks of stitching in just one solid color if that's not what you like? If I was a little more careful about critically appraising patterns and seeing if they actually were something I would enjoy stitching, I might make some better choices. And number 5, why are you buying the materials for this project? Are you buying it because you have a particular space on your wall and want something in these colors and this subject matter to fill it with? Are you stitching it for a gift? Are you buying it because you want to support your favorite designer? Are you buying it because you have a collection of that brand of kits or that designer's charts? Does it just look fun to stitch? Or maybe are you just jumping on the bandwagon with everybody else? Going through my stash from years ago, the only ones that I really regret, and regret is a strong word, probably too strong for what I'm feeling. The ones I question are the ones where I got excited about a designer because everybody else was excited about that designer, and I jumped on the bandwagon at the time but didn't get around to stitching them, and those might sit in my stash for a long, long time. So those are my 5 things to consider while you are picking out future cross-stitch projects. How much consideration these actually require, sometimes it's easy. If it is a 50-cent kit at the thrift store, don't spend a lot of time thinking about whether you're gonna stitch with your least favorite color of floss or do back stitching. If it is something that is going to be a real splurge for you, then maybe do sit down and ask yourself all these questions. Let me know, do you carefully consider your projects before you plunge in? Do you limit yourself to things that you know that you will finish and that you enjoy stitching? Do you have a set size that you will not go over, or a set fabric count that you will not stitch on? I'm curious. Let me know in the comments below. I'm Michelle. This is my romantic tangle. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with you with more cross-stitching videos soon.